Thank you so much, Adam. So as Adam said, my name is Emily Mack, and I am the Director for the Department of Metropolitan Development for the City of Indianapolis. So starting in about the summer of 2019, the city partnered with IndyGo and the Metropolitan Planning Organization to help spearhead and launch transit-oriented development efforts within Indianapolis. As a community, we're so fortunate to have an incredible investment in our transit system. And we want to help support that investment with the creation of compact, walkable, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use developments adjacent to our transit stations. So, to help us, we engaged national experts, and we brought in Gould Evans and Toole Design and Urban 3 to really help us understand those national best practices and what changes Indianapolis needs to make in order to ensure successful implementation. And this initiative is so important to us because, first, it's one of our goals with the Bloomberg Challenge and the American Cities Climate Challenge goals. But secondly, we want to support our community's investment in transit by creating vibrant, human-centered places of activity around transit stations for Indianapolis' residents. So as a city, we need to be thinking strategically about valuable land use around our BRT lines. And I'm so excited for Joe Minicozzi's deep dive into why transit-oriented development is vital to a city's success, especially the financial aspect. So let me give you a little bit of background on Joe. He's a city planner and an urban designer who is passionate about helping cities and towns reach their economic potential by cultivating their unique sense of place. He founded Urban 3 in 2011 to help explain market dynamics created by tax and land use policies, and to help communities improve their financial position through urban design. Joe's worked in government and real estate development and finance, and he served as the executive director of Asheville, North Carolina's Downtown Association. In 2017, he was named one of Planet Citizen's 100 most influential urbanists. His work has been featured in the Congress for New Urbanism, the American Planning Association, the International Association of Assessing Officers, and Partners for Smart Growth conferences. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Joe Minicozzi.
Probably forgot to tell you that I'm also a ULI member. So I've been one since the 90s. Let's get this started. This is kind of an interesting presentation for me to make because it's going to be somewhat entertaining for you all, but it's also a deep dive in what we're doing with our team. They're all here in the audience. I'm sort of the radiologist on the team. We're doing the CAT scans to get things ready for the surgeons to do their work. So these are all basically economic reports that we're doing for your community. So this is also going to be a little bit of, maybe I want to get you out of your head a little bit about how you look at real estate and how we look at cities. So for me, it's a financial cash flow model. I think if you all want, I might be an obstructed viewing for you. Everything's going to be going on over here. There's some open seats on this side if you want to grab them. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. Who's been to Asheville? Show of hands. Oh, wow. Thanks for drinking our beer. Cool. Asheville, as you all know, it's up in the mountains of western North Carolina, beautiful setting, Blue Ridge Mountains, bluegrass music. We have 40 breweries. That's about 2,500 people per brewery. We drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place. Well, Asheville didn't start that way. Asheville was actually the second largest city in North Carolina, and then it cratered in the Depression. And this is how Asheville started, and it blew up during the 20s and then fell flat on its face in the 70s. Unlike a lot of American cities, these are shots of downtown Asheville from not too long ago. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity. So when you come to my town and you see how beautiful it is and you see all the activity, you've got to realize we were flat on our face. We were destitute and poor. There were folks that didn't believe in downtown. They said, we're not urban, we're rural mountain people. This isn't who we are. You know, we're rural people. And there was this bias toward a certain pattern of development without acknowledging the fact of who we were. I worked in real estate development for this guy's company. This is Julian Price. Julian took $15 million of his personal wealth and created a revolving fund real estate development company, a for-profit real estate development company. 25% of that money would be used for starting businesses, and 75% would go to the sticks and bricks. So we'd fix a building, and then we'd find people to operate the stores on the ground floor. It was all about making housing downtown and bringing people downtown. We own the Orange Peel, is one of the top 5 nightclubs in the entire country. It's about making these things that people want to be at. But it's real simple real estate development. This is before and this is after. Real rocket science. That building was just hiding back there, waiting to be used. But what we found ourselves doing over and over and over again was constantly explaining to our citizens, what does it mean for you all for us to do this development? What's the data behind what's going on there? It's not just about us staying in business. We want to stay in business. We want to keep that money going in our community, but we're building community. We're all in it together. So the aha moment for me was thinking about real estate the same way we talk about farms. If you talk to a farmer talks about economics. The farmer doesn't go out and just till all of the soil. The farmer's doing a cash flow analysis. So this is one of our buildings. This is one of our crops, right? So thank you, city. Thanks for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. We were actually accused of being subsidized because the city built that sidewalk. So it's like, all right, fine, whatever. We put in retail, office, and residential. So we took the taxable value of the property from $300,000 to $11 million, right? So the math on that is, y'all just got 3,500% more taxes, right? Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. Do y'all have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? Isn't that awesome? This is about building our wealth, right? And people are like, well, Joe, that's not fair. We've got this Walmart over here at $20 million. Fair enough that Walmart's twice our value, but it took 34 acres of my city to make that happen. Our building's on 0.5 acres. When you use the gross number, you're missing the efficiency of what our building is, right? So per acre, we're doing 100 times more taxes per acre than them. Would you have thought that? Per acre, we're killing them with double the retail taxes. Who would have thought that a furniture shop, a beauty salon, and a tattoo shop is more tax productive than a Walmart? Don't believe your biases. Look at the data and see what's going on. We also have more residents, 90 units of residential per acre. Could y'all imagine if I was proposing a 90 unit of residential per acre in some town around here? Like, what train would you run me out of town on? Is that bad? And then also jobs. So why is it we've built cities this way for tens of thousands of years with this high level of economic productivity, and we still get suburbia or Walmarts and other stuff? Are we asking these questions? So I want you to realize this isn't scary math that I'm doing here. It's actually 5th grade division. This is not hard. This isn't anything I learned in a real estate class. When we talk about cars, we talk about cars on a miles per tank basis. Could y'all imagine if I'm having coffee with you over here and we're talking about my truck getting 650 miles per tank? You'd laugh at me. Like, Joe, come on now, that's stupid. Tanks are all different sizes. That's got a big tank. We say miles per gallon. That's how we judge the efficiencies of cars, because all tanks are different sizes, right? We say miles per gallon, we should all be driving BMW Acetas. Sorry to your Prius owners, but 1955 technology is more efficient. It's also more dangerous. If you have a head-on in this thing, you're like stuck. But, you know, whatever. I'm being cute with some language here because I want you to understand the words that we don't use in our day-to-day discourse about how we build our cities. And what I found is, I started doing this in 2009, going out and talking about this stuff, and I put this quote up from Mark Twain. A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read, right? I stood before the room, and I put my hand in the air, and I said, who in this room understands millage rates and how your tax system assessment policies work inside your community? So here were a bunch of people that wanted to build better cities, and they were completely ignorant about the tax policies and decisions of how their cities cash flow. We're functionally illiterate on how this stuff all operates. So that's what I see our job is, to help explain that. But why does tax policy matter? At a core level, why does it matter? Well, I'll explain. So we're a $15 million investor in downtown Asheville. Back when we started downtown Asheville, these are the values of downtown as a portfolio. So all of downtown, the central business district, was $100 million back then. Just by doing what you saw there, fixing up buildings that existed, all those boarded up buildings, we didn't get a new building in downtown Asheville until 2008. So fixing up what we already had brought about $400 million of new value to our community. So that $500 million was just sitting there, just not used. Now, to show you that it's not all love and roses in Asheville, every community has its challenges. This is my buddy Chris Peterson, and these are some of his campaign ads complaining about the city's municipal investment in the downtown, the subsidy going to downtown property owners. I like this. I like the guy's like, look at, he's crying. He's all shackled to a ball. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, streets for our citizens. Y'all got people like Chris? Every community I go to has a Chris. What I love about this, $26 million. You know, Chris is right. $26 million is a lot of money. I don't have $26 million. But let's do some math here. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and it grows to $500 million, is investing 26 and yielding 430, is that a good return on investment? Yeah. Why the hell do we listen to Chris? You know, Chris drives the public discourse. I mean, hell, he's even got a website now with fire and brimstone. I like the mayor's getting hit by a lightning bolt. I asked the mayor, I'm like, is that a liquor drink? She goes, it should be. You know, we've allowed our public discourse to devolve in such a dysfunctional way without seeing the common good of what we're all trying to produce. So when I talk to people about the city, I want you to realize it's a finite boundary of land. My state legislature took away the ability for my city to annex land. The area that we are is the area that we are. Marion County, you can't annex the next county over. That's all you have. So y'all are invested in a corporation that's called the city. And just look at it. Don't take my word for it. This is Oxford American Dictionary. Incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. By law, cities are really big real estate development projects. Counties are bigger versions of that. Your state's an even bigger version of that. Your state's incorporated. It's not just your state, it's also our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show in 2016. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. At midnight, I'm such a nerd, I'm looking it up. There's the federal law at the bottom for any attorneys in the room. We are listed as a federal corporation. It doesn't say that we're a capitalistic corporation, but by law, we're all in it together. It's a sharehold. So my city at $13 billion of taxable value is 6 times the value of Ted Turner. I know you all didn't meet any of my counselors or mayor, but I can guarantee you they're not qualified to run CNN. They're not looking at the data, but they should be. This is critically important stuff. We've done this all across the country. It doesn't matter what state we're in. They're all different tax policies, but they all yield the same results. When you mash everybody's data together, this is what you see. For every dollar of county single-family tax value out there and paid in property tax to the county, their brother and sister in the city's paying about 5 times that to the same county. Here's the Walmart, here's the mall, this is a 2-story building, this is a 3-story building, that's a 6-story building. This could be Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or downtown Dallas. When you start stacking those stories, you're stacking your wealth, right? You know, sometimes some people say to me, they're like, dude, what's your problem? Why do you hate Walmart? If that's what you're thinking, you're totally missing the point. I'll tell you, you heard that I went to the assessors conference. I don't know if you all have been to an assessors conference, but it makes a ULI conference feel like Burning Man. It's the squarest thing ever. I mean, these people are nerds. Imagine 2,000 assessors. Well, I was at the conference. This guy gets up at 8 in the morning. He's the keynote speaker talking about the value of Walmart. He did the most amazing presentation on how crappy their buildings are. I was blown away. I was like, this is brilliant. Imagine this. You can go in and in one meeting get 3,000 properties value deducted with one meeting. That's highly efficient. Good for him. Now, I'm trained as an architect, so I'm having a coronary. I'm like, how is he getting away with this? Why doesn't anybody care? He's basically yelling in the room, we're going to pay the lowest taxes in your community possible. And everybody's like, great, how can we help? That's the system. If you build a system based on valuation, there's a perverse incentive for me to build junk in your corporation, period. If you're okay with that, great. So I went up to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And unapologetically, he said to me, 15 years, maybe 20 years, we want to depreciate it as fast as possible, maximize the depreciation, we'll build another building and start the depreciation cycle again. There you have it. If that's a good deal for you, great, go for it. But make sure it's a conscious choice. If you're okay with a 15-year building, which is the life cycle of a cat, go for it. I'm a dog person, sorry, but we at least mourn the passing of a cat, not the Walmart. Understand the numbers of this stuff. So one of the ways that we show this is my county, this is Buncombe County. And what you see here is, this is the valuation model. So this is the way people typically took at real estate. So this is 350 square miles. I have non-taxable in gray. So this is a big federal park right here, part of the Blue Ridge Parkway. I have low value in green, high value in purple. So low values in green, high values in purple. This is the Biltmore estate, this big purple splotch. The Biltmore estate is America's largest house. It's worth $100 million for one house. Anybody have a $100 million house in here? No. When Bill Cecil, owner of the Vanderbilt Mansion, shows up at a council meeting, we all genuflect and thank him for his time. He's a very important person. But it's not a fair way of looking at the economics. He's got a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. He's got the biggest gas tank. Of course it's going to be worth a lot of money. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre. Here's efficiency. I'll just show it to you in 3D. Anybody want to guess where downtown Asheville is? I don't even have to label it. You see the purple mountain shooting off the map. Now we can also see my little sister over here, Black Mountain. We can see its downtown. This is a village of 8,000 people. We can see its downtown writ large in the economics of the model. Conversely, to do the opposite is a tax advantage. Why would somebody do something more complicated, more difficult in your community? Why would somebody give you all that wealth? Have we built an economic system that works for you? So our role in all of this was to look at you all under the same lens and bring the data forward for the design team to start talking about as we move forward, or you all move forward with zoning changes, putting policies in place. You need to understand what it means to you all as a corporation and how to grow your wealth. So first of all, I'll go ahead and admit I'm from North Carolina. I'm just a dummy. I don't understand your tax system. So this is the way my tax system works, by the way. I've got a market value. We get a taxable reduction to get a taxable value. Everybody, doesn't matter what kind of property you have, we all get the same tax deduction, commercial, residential, whatever. And then we get a tax rate and done. This is called a straight line system. This is the most simple one that we've ever discovered. Y'all a little bit more complicated. You have a gross adjusted value, and then you take off your deductions. Your deductions is a list of about 30 different things. If you're a disabled veteran that owns a heritage barn with a solar panel on it, you're like cooking with gas. There's all these different things they give you a discount. And then you get your tax rate that's set to get your tax bill. That's called option one. Y'all passed this thing called a circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is option two, but option two has 3 subsets. So that's option one. Your circuit breaker has, if you're 1%, if you're a homestead, if you're like some other kind of housing, like a duplex or a small apartment, that's a 2% tax. If you're commercial, that's 3%, right? Those are the different circuit breakers you go through, different channels. What the tax assessment policy does is they pick whichever is cheaper for you all and send you down that road. So you get the lowest of whatever tax, which as a resident, that's kind of awesome. You're going to give me a deal? I'm not going to pay money? Awesome. I get all this infrastructure, I don't have to pay for it. That's a good deal. So here's how it works. This is the capped maximums on value for homestead, other residential, and commercial. If you take $500,000 of value of each of these, this is what the tax bills would look like. So you have $5,000 for homestead, $10,000 for higher density residential, and $15,000 for commercial. Let's go back for a second. By the way, if anybody's, this is being videotaped, so you'll have a copy of all of this. Let's do some complex math. What's the difference between 1% and 2%? That would be called double. What's the difference between 1% and 3%? That would be called triple. Are you guys okay with charging your commercial properties 3 times the taxes of residential? That's what's happening. So when you see this little like 1%, it seems so innocent. But when you look at the tax bills, it's triple. It's double if you're a renter. I didn't know you guys hated your renters so much. So if you're a single-family homeowner, you're paying 1%. If you're a renter, you pay 2%. That seems fair. Do you think somebody that owns a rental apartment is just going to, like, out of the glory of their own heart, they're going to pay that extra taxes? Of course not. That's going to get passed on through to the renter, just so you know. It's called math. We went ahead and mapped it. I'm not going to go through this whole map, but this is how your tax rate looks across Marion County on who's paying 1% or 2% and higher. Or another way of looking at it is this. Again, obviously this is super complicated to show in this room, so you'll have a copy of this. But this is who's 1%, 2%, 3%. We're doing this analysis to see if we see a pattern. Is there anything going on? Is there a relationship between land use and infrastructure? Is there anything our team can understand? But we're trying to figure out how you're paying your money. So here's taking all of Marion County and breaking it down into who's a 1%er, a 2%er, or a 3%er, and then you have non-taxable stuff like this building, and then here's the contribution. So the land area footprint of the 1%ers is basically about a one-to-one relationship of what they put into the kitty in your taxes. So for anybody that's in a single-family home ownership situation, this is what you put in. You're basically a one-to-one ratio. For the 2 and 3%ers, you're actually punching above your weight. That's your data. Just be informed on that. Income tax, you all pay an income tax. I'm going to lobby this point hard throughout this presentation. You'll hear this. All of the different states operate differently. We don't have income tax at a local level in North Carolina. But for y'all, the majority of your taxes come out of property tax. You have a little bit of retail tax, and then this green stuff on top is your income tax. You generally want to be hanging out with the states on the left of this chart, like Wisconsin and Connecticut and stuff like that. Controlling your property cash flow out of your property value is good because it's directly connected to land use. When you're on the right-hand side over here next to Louisiana, Arkansas, and Alabama, they're running their cities primarily off retail taxes. So in a recession, people don't buy a boat or a car or a TV. All of a sudden, you can't afford your cities because the recession hits retail first. So that's okay. About half your city's revenues come from your property tax. Almost half comes from your income tax. So we tried to ferret out, is there a way to map where it's coming from and where it's going to from your income tax perspective? This is the best that we could do. This is your income tax return to the areas, because your state doesn't allow us the ability to see where it's coming from, which is highly irregular, to say the least. That's something you should ask for. You should be allowed to see this data so that you can make conscious decisions about your data. So we tried to suss it out. You can see up in Hamilton County, you do export some revenue up there. So put simply, if you work over here in downtown, your income tax follows you out to your house. So if you live in Carmel, your dollars that you create here in downtown go up there in Hamilton County with them. And I'm not going to make a comment about fairness of that, but we should at least be able to see where that's going. And Hamilton County should send you a thank you card every once in a while or something. But so measuring the people, here are the jobs that come into Marion County. So you bring about 67,000 people in from Marion. But what's nice is, from Hamilton, you have about half your population are homegrown people that live in Marion and work in Marion. So that's pretty good. So here's Hamilton, this little pie slice here. So basically, you import 300,000 people from other counties into Marion County. You export about 100,000, so you bring in 2 people for 1 person that leaves. And then you internally capture about 300,000 people, which is cool. So that's your data. So you're actually a good job center here with that. So here's your population. We're trying to figure out, okay, where do people live, and then where do the people work? Here's where people work. But you can see that there's some pretty high density even in downtown where you currently have. So you actually haven't totally hollowed out your downtown like a lot of American cities. You have a lot of people live in downtown. And you have some pretty high density places on the west side as well. These are all census block data. Here's your jobs. So you clearly have the lion's share of jobs in and around your downtown in the campus area over here. So here's the housing stacked on top of the jobs. So clearly, there's folks that live downtown. Chances are, again, we couldn't get into the data to see this. There's a lot of folks that live in these areas that also work in the downtown and maybe walk home to work or something. They're keeping that money local, at a hyper-local level. But this is the best that we could do to come up with your income tax. It's a pretty nerdy thing, but we had to run it. As we look at the corridor for the blue line, you need to think of a threshold that you want to have. Or, we were the team. I was joking that I called it a 2-drink minimum. Like, what's the minimum level that you need to have from a density standpoint and a job standpoint to keep money coming on that corridor to pay for that bus rapid transit? That's a way to think about it fiscally. Does that make sense? So we're saying about 30 units an acre would need to be the threshold in the corridor. Anything under that, you're losing money. You're putting money into the ground without getting revenue back. So again, I'm going to hammer the point. Ask your state legislature to see the data. At the very least, you should be able to see that. So here's your county total value, or miles per tank. And you can see all the big parcels on the north side, super valuable. But again, they're huge parcels. This is the way you actually function from a financial standpoint. Here it is in 3D. Now, this is your actual cash flow, your full value. Now, as you know, some of these are 2%, 1%, and et cetera. When people talk about TIF, the 2%, 1%, that's essentially a TIF, right? You're not paying full value, you're getting a discount. So when you look at that, this is what you're actually paying. So just be warned or thought through that all of those neighborhoods outside of downtown, the state basically gives you a big TIF. It's not a conscious TIF like doing a real estate development project, but when you get a discount on your taxes, that's a TIF. So this is the difference in the TIF, if you can see that visually. It's spread across your whole, it's spread across your whole city. The actual TIF projects, probably hard to see here, drop out. I'll come back to those. This is a side view looking south to north on the left. Is this all too nerdy for you guys? Are you good with this? So this shows you the potency of where your taxes come from. Now remember, we're setting this model up so that you can think about everybody's paying like a skim coat of taxes across the whole thing. Where do you get the majority of your taxes? And you can see a lot of it's coming out of your downtown, although there are some core areas along your north side that pop up. So your TIF stuff, these are your TIFs. So inside your cash flow, they essentially vaporize, right? But it's really not a fair way of looking at it. Yes, they're not paying into the tax system the way a regular property is. Those properties will come back to you eventually. So it's more like there's these glass buildings that will eventually pop into the tax system, because they're not designed like a Walmart. They're not designed to be scraped into a landfill in 15 years. These are buildings that will have a long lifetime. So that's building value into the future. 33% of your county is non-taxable. These are parks, museums, stuff like that. That's about average for what we see. Your downtown's about 26% non-taxable. This is something to pay attention to. You're actually doing all right. My city's 44% non-taxable, which is not good. So as long as you be mindful of that and how you use your real estate, this is your most fertile soil in your downtown. Make sure you maximize that. And then what we're going to get into is the transit corridor, which is like each of these little circles is a pedestrian shed of how far people will walk adjacent to the transit. And those are your opportunities of creating new value and helping your community. So your city is a portion of your county, is essentially 8% of the land area and 8% of the property taxes. So it's like a 1-to-1 ratio of productivity. Your downtown is a shareholder of the corporation of Marion County, barely shows up as a footprint of the county, is producing 10% of the county's wealth. That's a 1-to-12 ratio of productivity. That's amazing. What's good for your downtown is great for your city, but it's unbelievable for your county from a productivity standpoint. The corridor, in its current state, dropping the downtown out of it, so downtown isn't part of these numbers, is 3% of your county area. It's 11% of the value. So it's about 1-to-3 ratio of productivity. That's pretty good in the current state. So anything beyond that, any investment that you do beyond that will create more wealth and more wealth potency. This is a good place to invest. Little sidebar. There are suburban biases baked into the system all over the place. This is one of my favorites. When we get your data, is there any tax assessors in the room? Good. We'll get your data, and we always have to test how your assessors do math. And we just want to see, are there standards that they're following, or are they making human error? Both happen. But we'll take the buildings and turn the buildings off and just look at the dirt value per acre. And this is one of the worst cases we've ever seen. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. So this is just nothing but dirt, right? Dirt per acre. So there's no buildings in here. So this should look a little bit more consistent than it is. You see this neighborhood in the upper left here, how everybody's blue, right? That seems fair. When I was presenting in Cheyenne, I said, what's going on with this parcel right here, where it's blue, it's $15,000 an acre, and when you cross the street in the same zoning district, same school district, same fire district, same police district, when you cross the street, it doubles in value to orange. Does anybody know this? So I'm just like, how did this happen? How does land double in value when you cross the street? And the tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raises her hand, and she just belts out, "You don't understand." And I'm like, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land over here. The more land you have, the lower the value. That was my reaction. The mayor laughed so hard, he almost spat coffee out of his nose. I'm like, really? I get more land, you give me a discount? She goes, yeah, that's our standard. I'm like, okay, I've got 3 miles of street around this property. This fellow's got 200 feet. She goes, oh, we don't count the infrastructure as part of the valuation. I said, so you're going to run a business, you're going to put investment in the ground, you don't want to get your money back? She goes, oh, that's not our standard. I get more infrastructure, I get more land, you give me a discount? She goes, yeah, that's our standard. So the reason why I was at the assessors conference was to ask them about this. Now, by the way, the assessors magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I asked them, how is this fair? How is it equitable? And to their credit, you know what the response was? It's not. I'm like, where'd this come from? They're like, we don't know. I'm like, did Moses deliver this? Like, where did this? And they're like, you need to talk to Larry. I'm like, Larry who? They're like, Larry Clark. So I find this guy, Larry Clark, in the hallway. He thought this joke was funny. And I said, how is it fair? How is it equitable? He's like, I don't know. It's not. Now that you point that out, we need to change it. I'm like, where'd this come from? He's like, probably something in the 1700s. Nobody's really looked at it before. We probably need to change it. So can you see how the market gets manipulated? If you give me a discount, what am I going to do? Use it. Don't hate the player, hate the game. If you let me waste your land and build junk architecture, what am I going to do? Waste your land and build junk architecture. It's just business, folks. We need to change the system to your advantage, and the developers will follow. This is what we do in development, right? We build according to policies. So we looked at yours. This is your land value model. Now, we see a couple little weird things, like this person is being absolutely screwed right there. But generally speaking, that's probably an error, you know? That's all right. But generally speaking, your model looks all right. Your commercial corridors are denser. You've got the lake effect. This is kind of fun. You know, and this is pretty obvious. Land around a lake is going to be more valuable than land that doesn't have a lake view. But what you see, let's see, in the corridor, you see how out parcels are worth more than larger parcels. So you still have that standard baked into your system. Change it. Talk to your assessors. And again, remember, your assessors are awesome. They will talk to you if you bring them evidence and talk about equity and fairness. That's their mantra. They want to do that. They just don't see the data this way. So that's why we gave you this information. Is that all too weird for you all? Are you happy to be down the wormhole with me with all of this stuff? So let's talk about you. Every city has key ingredients that make up the buildings of a city. So we always grab your Walmart as the control subject. It's like your Big Mac. Everybody's got a Big Mac. There it is. Your Walmart's pulling about $500,000 of value per acre, just so you know. I'll keep that on the bottom of the slide down here as we go forward because we'll get into your residential first. So your single family countywide is pulling about, it's called about a quarter of a Walmart in value at about $185,000 an acre. Your multifamily stuff, or as you get denser, this is when it starts to get weird. You can look at all these buildings. They're all the same building, right? But look at the valuation of the market value and then the taxable value and the difference. So it's basically these two houses that are the exact same thing side by side. This one has a $276,000 an acre discount. This one has $176,000. So it's just, this is what's going on inside your tax system. It's not equitable at that level where you can look at that as a cash flow. But this is just what happens when people just arbitrarily make policy without testing it on the ground. So this is what you're dealing with. There's a lot of conversation these days about missing middle, the architecture that we used to build in the 1920s of middle density. You're actually old enough that you have this stuff from your streetcar suburbs all over the place, these things. This is the Lincolnshire Apartments at $1.6 million an acre. Would you guys all thought that that was like 3 times the potency of a Walmart right there? It is. This awesome thing, which is like highly illegal now in your current zoning code, but here it is at $5 million. Boy, we better stop that. That's just nothing but trouble. And here's, this is $1 million. So you're getting some new stuff that's actually replicating that old architecture and again, bringing you with you that wealth. But again, know these numbers. And again, here's the Walmart. So this thing's 10 times the value of a Walmart right there. And then these are some of my favorites. I love these Alabama townhouses, or these townhouses on Alabama, pulling between $4 and $6 million an acre of value. Now, not only are they producing $4 to $6 million an acre in value, but they've been doing that for 100 years. That's cool. So here's some newer ones right next to it at $6 million. These guys on the red line, this is a new building at about $5.6 million. Here's an old one at $6.5 million. So you're getting this high potency. You have these examples all over your city as a portfolio. You have these examples. Like if I were doing this presentation in Florida or Arizona, like they wouldn't understand what I was talking about, but you get it. You have it. And again, you're building it. This is the Coil at $10 million of value per acre. On the north side and on the kind of the southeast side is Parker Place at $10 million. These are both basically the same value. And this one's got subsidized housing in it. This one here, on the near east side, Ohio and east, this is pulling $40 million of value per acre. Highly, highly potent stuff. Your multifamily average across the city is pulling about, let's call it $600,000 of value per acre. Now, climbing up the scale into commercial, first we have to start with, again, your boxes at 500,000, and then you get your dead boxes at like 100,000. So again, mind you, I can just sit on that land and just bleed you dry, and you're not taxing me for it. You're not taxing me the cost of the road or the street light that's there. The more I let my building fall apart, the less taxes I pay. It's a good deal for me. Here's some of these other boxes. Notice the fields of parking in all of these, 300,000, 200,000, 200,000. This kind of blew my mind. We were really excited about these things until we pulled their valuation. We're just like, wow, stairway to heaven or something. What's going on here? But this is $300,000 of value per acre, and it's mostly because of this massive car field that's back here. It's not only this parking lot, but it's that one too. That liquidates the value because it's low improvement. This is cool. Look at this little village dog up here pulling $1 million of value per acre. Like, that's really something to write home about architecturally, but it's killing it from a financial standpoint. And then these old buildings at $2 million of value per acre right there. This is on the north side, this is the Fresh Market at $2.5 million. And then right across the street are these two old buildings. This one's pulling $1.5 million of value per acre right there, or 3 times the value of a Walmart. So again, these examples are all around your community, but you get this kind of stuff. Okay, I drive a car, I need a gas station, but does this need to be on your bus corridor? And when that happens, that building pays a commensurately low tax with it. So this is pulling $500,000 and $400,000. So if you just had the village dog, you'd double your value. Like, surely you could set a minimum of what your expectations are on the properties and what you need to get your value back in your investments. You're gonna be paying for that bus and that road, get the money back. This empty building right here is pulling $4 million. You'd be better off with an empty building by, 4 times over than a gas station. It's just data. There it is, $4 million. So if you fix that thing, imagine what happens to its value. So that's where you should be exerting your influence. That's where you should be working with people with incentives and stuff like that. Here's a new building at about $5 million of value per acre. This is kind of fun. Here's the Hardys pulling $440,000 and the Salesforce right across the street at $2 million. So let's think about this for a second. We've got a street section, right? We've got a street, we know the cost of the street. On one side of the street, it's paying, what is that, less than a quarter what the other side of the street is paying? How is that consistent? How is that a good business plan for you all? It's not gonna work. And this is what happens with every American city. There's incentives for me to waste your real estate. Close those loopholes. I have to say, this is like one of the weirdest buildings I've ever seen, but it's also kind of endearing and cool. It's pulling $32 million of value per acre. That's actually a really good idea right there. Line your parking deck with a useful taxable value that also provides housing in your downtown area. That's super smart. Architecturally, it's a little weird, but hey, 32 million. The Meridian's killing it at 90 million, and then your big buildings. This is 360 Market at 60 million, Salesforce at 80 million. Who would have thought that the Mass Avenue, that block of mixed-use buildings, is actually double the potency of Salesforce? Would you have thought that when you walk by it? And then your Conrad is the big spike in your city, pulling $340 million an acre. Now, what's crazy about your Conrad is a lot of it's been there for a while. Do you know the story of the AT&T building in downtown? This is the AT&T building here in the early 1900s. Your community, your people, found that land so valuable, they literally moved the building with people in it. This is them rotating the building. They built this round ramp, and they essentially turned the building every single day while people at work. And they eventually, it took them about a month to move the building, but they moved it to the side so they could build another building next to it. That's understanding the value of land. That's understanding the value of place. This is your community did that. It's mind-blowing. But you look at this. This is the Conrad. There it is today. This is a piece of it right here. Here's a piece of it in 1940. Here's a piece of it sitting around in 1910. And look at your people in the street just walking around. There's mass transit. You have this lesson in your community of understanding urbanism. Just go with it. It's your history. I'm not going to bother going through these two charts, but this is basically the 3D model done as a bar chart. Residential's in blue. Here's your single family back here. A commercial single use, like this is a CVS, which is barely above residential. Here's your Walmart. Commercial single use is in red, and mixed-use buildings are in green. And it's real simple. When you start mixing uses and stack stories, you're getting wealth. This is the coil over here at 10 million compared to single family. And let's go up the chart to the downtown. Here's the coil down here now, and this is the stuff in your downtown area. So that's just showing you your potency. So simply put, if you basically cut a sixth of the Conrad off the Conrad, just 1/6 of it, it would equal the entire Walmart in value. And that's the footprint difference right there on the right. If you had an acre of Tiki Bob's, do y'all know Tiki Bob's? Basically, if you had 5 Tiki Bob's, it would equal the Peddler's Mall in value. How are you going to use your land? What do you want to give rewards for? If you had like a third of an acre of those townhouses on Alabama, it would equal the 2-acre FedEx building. You know, when people see these things, the Dollar Generals, when you see them happening, it's just a different form of the same math. How do I disinvest in your community and make my development project work without you penciling out your side in your corporation? I love this. This is one of my favorite buildings, Big Red's Liquors. They do have a whiskey warehouse, in case anybody's wondering. There's Big Red's. Basically, if you had 14 Big Reds, it would equal the 89-acre Washington Square Mall. Your numbers. So, going through your land use, these are your streets. This is the stuff you own. As a developer, when I build those streets and I give them to you, it's a liability on your grandkids. It's that simple. 50 years from now, you have to rebuild every single road that I've given you. This is your buildings. This is your parking. Do you know you had this much parking? You basically have 27% of your county is surface parking. It's mind-blowing. So here's your land area as your county. This is your parking, this is your buildings, this is your roads, your liabilities. This is everything else, berms, buffers, backyards, farms, parks, whatever. Here's your water, it's non-taxable, but here's the valuation. Then one of the things I thought is like, why doesn't if we know who's using the roads, which are cars, right? Why doesn't the value of parking match the value of the roads? You own close to $18 billion worth of roads. Yet your parking is pulling less than $500 million in value. So what ends up happening is you raid that building fund to pay for the roads. Are you there at the commission meetings where you decide that? Where you decide to put money into roads rather than fund a school program or affordable housing? Are you guys making that choice? No. You should. Is that too depressing? So when you get into the corridor area, we did the same thing for the transit area. Those parking lots should be your high priorities. Stripping out the downtown, you're looking at 36% of a bus corridor is surface parking. That's your low-hanging fruit. Now, what's crazy about that pie chart, that's actually more parking than Marion County percentage. You have more of a percentage of surface parking in that bus corridor than you do countywide. That's not good. So start there. Oh, by the way, is parking, we wanted to make it relevant for you all. So here's your speedway. This is how much parking's in the bus area. About 3.5 speedways worth of parking. I was going to expect a laugh out of that one, but this is all spatial analysis. I know this joke doesn't work for people under the age of 35, but we're just doing maps and just seeing what's happening. And then there's a financial aspect to this. So this is your buildings. Okay, this is Marion from Marion County. So these are actually your numbers. And Marion has 1,200 square feet of buildings dedicated to her, 900 square feet of parking, and about 2.5 parking spaces dedicated to her. So each one of you has, if you're a Marion County resident, you have 2.5 parking spaces dedicated to you. That's the gift the world has provided for you. Financially, when this gets built, the assessor is going to go out there and put a price tag on the buildings and the parking. The buildings are worth about $52 a square foot. Your parking's worth less than $1 a square foot in valuation. Now, as you all know, the roads you have to pay for. Your road's going to cost you $22 a square foot in front of the building and $22 a square foot in front of the parking, right? So let's think this through. If I'm paying 2% in taxes on $52 and 2% in taxes on 75 cents, that means I'm paying 30 times less taxes on parking than buildings, right? But my cost is the same. That's called a subsidy, right? Do y'all remember, do you have council meeting minutes where you decided to give parking a 30 times subsidy? Do you remember that? I haven't seen it in the minutes anywhere. This is what you have in your community. This is your cash flow on how you're losing value. So we run the numbers, like surely maybe it's because y'all are Indy fans and you have lots of cars or something. So here's a map of all the people that don't have any cars in your county. Here's a map of people with 1 car, 2 cars, and 3 cars. So when you break it down, half of Marion County, 10% have no cars, and 40% have 1 car per household. So you're looking at half of your population in Marion County has 1 car or less. Did you know that? Half your population has 1 car or less, but everybody's got 2 parking spaces. That's a little weird. Inside the transit corridor, you're looking at close to 60% of your population has 1 car or less. So when you hear of talking about reducing parking requirements or thinking different about parking, don't take your own biases to the table. Look at the data and see what's going on in your community. There are folks that don't have the time to come to this meeting. They don't have a car. So they don't have access to this public discourse. So we're building an environment for people with cars and not thinking about the context of the data of what we have. And you're paying for it. You have enough roads to go to Anchorage. Did you know that? If we ran the Indy 500 on here, the 500 miles would stop you at Eau Claire, Wisconsin. You actually have to rebuild a road. Imagine if you did this. Like every 50 years, you announced a capital campaign to rebuild a road to Anchorage every single year. That's what you do every 50 years. Is that scary? Okay. A lot of people tell me, like, Joe, but look, we're doing good. We don't see this pain the way that you explain it. I'll give you an example here real quick. This is Eugene, Oregon. So we ran a full cash flow model of this thing. We treated it like a real estate project. This is the city's revenues. And I'll give you a failure. Anybody work in finance for a city or government here? In finance, your financial officer follows the CAFR standard. In the CAFR standard, they list pipes and roads as assets. Did you all know that? Now, when I talked to the finance officer there, I said to her, well, in my business, my computer's an asset. If I had delivery vehicles, those would be assets, right? If you own real estate, that's an asset. Now, how do we treat real estate and cars and computers in our businesses? We have reserve accounts. We put an air conditioner on the roof. We know that we're going to have to replace that in 20 years, so we set up a little savings fund because I can't just go behind the curtain and just make money, right? I have to earn money to put it into the building. We don't do that with our cities. We know what the number is, but it's hidden on a separate ledger. We don't see that asset needs to be replaced. That pipe and that road aren't going to fix themselves. So what we did is we just created a model to show what that looks like from a cash flow standpoint. So here's the whole city floating in a lake. What's above the water line are the money payments that everybody's paying in taxes. What's beneath the water line is what everybody costs in their development patterns, their choices, right? So if you net your revenues against your expenses, this is what's in the black and what's in the red. Now we can see what's net positive and net negative, right? Here's the whole city in 3D, showing the net positive. If you lift this up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, these are all the subsidies. And it's spread all across the whole city. That's the development pattern that we have baked inside our financial system. So we'll break it down to buildings. On the top is residential, low density, medium density, high density. Then we have mixed use in the second, and commercial on the bottom, low, medium, high. We call this the Brady Bunch slide. It's just the averages of these things. These are the sticker prices. So the average single-family house in Eugene is subsidized to the tune of $1,400 an acre. That's the loss that we take with single-family housing. You have a similar pattern in your community. And I know the response is like, but Joe, I want a house. We all want a house. Heck, I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think you should pay for it. Make me happy. This is what we allow our public discourse to happen, right? When you have 80% of your land use in a pattern of subsidy, that's not a recipe for success. I'm not saying don't build a house. I'm just saying make sure you balance it out. So when you look at the kind of the cross-section of a city, don't just have one tree ring with so much real estate. Balance it out. Focus on the more urban areas and grow that wealth up for a little bit, and then think about the housing again. So the evidence is in the model. You see this little baby mountain up here. First of all, build more downtown stuff. That's net positive. But then why don't you do a little bit more of this little guy up here? Maybe you do, 4 of these or something. Find areas to cultivate wealth. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a different form of thinking, but you're going to yield results that aren't subsidized. We were having a meeting the other day in the corridor, and somebody said that she liked driving really fast. She liked having a parking lot. She was completely unconscious of the fact of what it costs society for her to have that pleasure. But when I put it out there that it costs her, every hamburger that she buys at Hardee's costs the community $5 on top of that, she was shocked. That's the subsidy that we all carry for that development pattern. So you all built wealth. We found your streetcar maps from your community from the early 1900s. That's your streetcar network that your grandparents had, which is crazy. That's an incredible network. So we dropped it on the system. You're currently building this. You're building a much longer system. And to be fair, you also have buses that supplant the system. But this is a pattern that you find in a city, is that kind of mass transit system building up that density. So speaking of transit, focusing in on the corridors and the Blue Line in specific, this thermometer down here is the total area of the Blue Line. It's about, let's call it 8,000 or 10,000 acres. This is all the land that's currently vacant in the corridor. So that's not paying any, relatively no taxes. There's no improvement on the dirt. There's about 11%. The dirt is worth more than the building on top of it. Let that wash over you for a second. That's low-hanging fruit from a real estate development opportunity. From a municipal standpoint, that's upside down financially. You have to do everything in your power to start working on that land. You have stuff that you probably shouldn't touch. 3-story buildings, 2-story buildings, stuff with a higher density, or maybe it's municipal or something, or heritage buildings. But there's a lot of 1-story buildings that are just have a lot of infrastructure, but not a lot of wealth, not a lot of value to it. So somewhere in here during this process, we need to find where that dividing line is. But we're talking somewhere around the tune of, let's call it 4,000 acres of opportunity in your community. 4,000 acres is huge. So that's what you can grow. We grabbed some sample properties around your community, use them like ingredients to drop into those little discs. So let's kind of zip ahead here. Taking 4 areas, these 4 right here, and just going onto the vacant land, this is what bumps up. So we just grabbed stuff like this, the Lincolnshire, your average county multifamily, average single family. If it was a vacant parcel of land, we just filled it with that stuff. Nothing all that complicated. This is the current value, 18 million in Lyndhurst, 16 million in Bellevue, 18 million in Sherman, and 25 million. That's your existing value, taxable value in those 100-acre areas. If we just pull its net value, just by filling up the empty space, it bumps up to 30 million, 20 million, 27, 35. So that's a gain of 71% in value just by repairing the fabric that's there, just by filling that vacant land. That's real easy. Does anybody have a savings account that grows by 71%? This is how you can make your wealth. This is how you can harvest that value capture. And that what that yields in taxes is $253,000 a year just in that one area alone in new taxes by getting rid of vacant land. So this is our recommendation as far as moving forward. This is an easy step. If you're not measuring this stuff, you can't manage it. You have to be looking at this data. Did you all know that Marion County was that 14 Colts? Y'all are shareholders in a $37 billion corporation. And I can tell you, Mr. Simon knows Jacoby Brissett's towel bill. I can tell you the cups in my nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. Do you know what a cost of a mile of road is? Or what the replacement reserve is on a mile of pipe? These are numbers you need to know for your corporation. You need to go into these conversations talking about that data and evidence and what's going on in your community. If you don't have the money for a greenway, the art teacher, or a dancing traffic cop, I haven't seen a dancing traffic cop yet, so I'm assuming you don't have them. It's not that you don't have the money, it's that you've buried it into a system that's draining your wealth. And just make sure it's a conscious choice, that you can afford that. We call this Geo Accounting, right? If we put your data on a map, you can see it. And I'm not here to judge you on your choices. Your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So can you afford this development pattern? Can you afford to drive like 90 miles an hour on this one street over here? It's kind of crazy. Was it Washington? You know, it's like, I see the way y'all drive. It's like, all right, if you want to drive that fast, great. There's a cost to it. And make sure that we're having a community conversation about it. So we put these numbers on a map so you can see it. They're happy numbers. So this is usually where I end the presentation. But for you all, I wanted to make it culturally relevant, give you some steps and some processes to get out of this and to work with this. So I'm going to speak to you as one of your own, David Letterman. So from the home office of Asheville, tonight's top 10. What are the 10 questions you need to be asking yourself when you leave this room? Number 10, why is the historic architecture in your community illegal? Why is it so difficult to build stuff that your great-grandparents built? Why do you have to go through a separate process? Start there with your zoning code. Build value in your community. Number 9, what's so wrong with a granny flat or an ADU? Thicken up. Find ways for people to build more units on existing infrastructure that you have. Is there anything wrong with that? You're actually building more capacity in your community. And for folks that are a homeowner, they can build wealth on their own property. That's kind of cool. Number 8, has anyone mentioned to Andrew Luck that quitting your job at the age of 29 is not considered retiring? I don't know. Is it too soon? Number 7, what's our minimum density to pay for infrastructure? Think of your development processes, particularly for this corridor, of having a 2-drink minimum. If we have an investment here, what do we need to achieve to get back to that? And if it's a matter of fairness and equity that we need to have affordable housing and everything else, great. Find a way to make that happen. Number 6, shouldn't parking value meet the road costs? And why a road to Alaska? Think about that. That's a long road. Now, it's not the worst that we've seen. Houston, by the way, Houston will start in Patagonia, go up and over the North Pole, and down to South Africa. They're not going to be able to build their way out of that. Number 5, why don't your buses look like race cars? Maybe put a fin on them or something. I mean, you're Indianapolis. Anyway. Number 4, what's up with all the gas stations in a bus corridor? Should you have at least some threshold of what kind of uses you want to have where this investment is? Think about that. Number 3, do you need all of the parking requirements on the corridor? You've got 36% of the area is parking. Just go ahead and just get rid of the parking requirements. Do you need it? In Asheville, we got rid of parking requirements in the 1980s in our downtown. That's one of the ways that we were able to revitalize our city, is we got rid of that use in our downtown. But we took a proactive management system to manage the parking. So we still have it. It's just managed better. Number 2, why not Geo Account your tax flow? Whatever you can do, visualize your economic information and go to the state and get that data. You deserve it. It's your taxes. And the number 1 question to ask yourself in Indianapolis, why so few Peyton Manning statues? Thank you.
I mean, Joe, it's like he's over there in the corner. He pulled off the top, and he just threw the grenade right over the wall, didn't he? All right, so we're going to take a few minutes with Joe, and I'll play Phil Donahue and take any of your questions and go find you. But I have one for you right off the bat.
Sure.
So it all sounded simple, the way that you talked about it, that we don't think necessarily about municipal finance the way we should. How big a role do state legislatures play in this in cities that tend to have maybe less of a home rule environment? That's an Indiana issue. We have cities who don't necessarily control their own destiny. So talk a little bit about that, where you've seen that. You're obviously a national consultant. You've worked around the country. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what you all don't know is North Carolina. In 2010, I was on the Downtown Association board, and our legislature flipped, which well-timed with the census, so they're able to gerrymander the state. Now, if you ever want to have some fun, look at the gerrymandered maps of North Carolina. We've been in a perpetual lawsuit at the state level at the Supreme Court. Our state legislature keeps on redrawing them, and they keep on getting sued because they're still just as gerrymandered. My city, which is 2 hours away from Charlotte, my representative is from Gastonia at Charlotte. So imagine, being on the eastern side of the state, and my state legislature is from a suburb of Indianapolis, not even the core of Indianapolis. So we get the red part of North Carolina as part of our legislature. Our state took our drinking water system away. This was after they passed an anti-eminent domain law. And so we asked the obvious. You took our water system for free. You didn't pay us anything for it. You also passed a rule saying no more eminent domain. That sounds like eminent domain to us. You at least owe us just compensation. And we were accused of acting up by our state legislature, so they took our airport away without paying for it. We did a lawsuit on the water system, and at that point, the state legislature threatened us with liquidating our charter for our city. That's the toe-to-toe fight we're in with our municipality and our state legislature. We're a Dillon's Rule state like you all, where we have to beg for things from our state legislature. We're at a point where we can't talk to them. And my attitude is, keep your hand out of my pocket if you're going to have this attitude against me. But we'll gladly give you wealth. I'll gladly share wealth with my brothers and sisters, but don't accuse me of being evil. Our state legislator called us a cesspool of sin after that. And, we're Southerners. We wanted to be polite. We're having a board meeting. We're like, surely he didn't mean that. Let's send a reporter and see, maybe he'll apologize. He doubled down after we sent the reporter. His second comment was, it's not the good people of Buncombe County, it's just that city part. Actually, it's just the downtown part. That's where them freaks and weirdos are. That's the cesspool. So we threw a cesspool party. We grabbed beer, we got in the street, we wore water wings, and we got flip-flops and danced around with some music. But what do? So there's things that are within your control. I think it's perfectly fair and reasonable just to see the information. You can't change the way that they set up state tax policy, but you can show the visuals and ask if it's fair or not. Part of the reason why we do these charts, I didn't use any language over a 6th grade word in this whole entire presentation. It's to give you the information that you can use as ammunition to communicate visually. There are things you can control and you can't, but arguing for your own efficiency or adopting local policies, there are things you can do with tax districts or TIF districts or other ways of plugging those gaps, Zoning code, you can do that with your zoning code. In Asheville, we have a 2-story minimum in most of our downtown that you can't come in and underbuild is a threshold. So there's things you can do without asking the state.
Okay, couple of quick questions here. We want to keep the going. Anybody have a question? Look at these people. They're all like, that was awkward. I feel a little uncomfortable. That was confrontational. Way to go, Joe. All right, question, Mr. Taft.
Yeah, more or less it seemed like a lot of what you're talking about in terms of taxable value is essentially density. Is there any difference you draw between density in cities and taxable value?
Density matters, design matters. Obviously if you build a more value, that's the other weird perversity, that there's a disincentive to build good architecture. I went to school as an architect, and we learned about all these great buildings. I mean, just look up over here. You can see that old school that you all have, and the incredible architecture that, have you seen the school lately? Does it look anything like that? So how was it that your community that had less wealth provided more value? And back in the day when we didn't have modern financial systems, it was mostly local money. So we invested more because, we'd feel guilty if we did a mediocre building in our city. But now that we've nationalized that revenue stream, it operates at a higher level of efficiency. So, it's harder to get good architecture. Do you know Henry George, land value taxation? Anybody hear of Henry George? Henry George is a tax economist in the late 1800s. He came up with this idea of eliminating improvement value. Just do dirt value. And what you should charge is what your investment is in the dirt adjacent to it. That should be the taxable value on the other side. Really simple. And he was steamed. Imagine being in Boston in the 1800s when all these boats show up from Europe and just dump a bunch of people into Boston, Philly, and New York. And that's what America was experiencing. So he thought it was patently unfair that your family stepped off the Mayflower and you could just sit on the land and speculate and pay taxes based on how you're using the land rather than what its potential latent value is, right?
But Joe, I'm German. I wouldn't do that to you, I promise.
But you were one of the people that came over off the boat, your family. Same with my family. Anyway, so he invented this thing called land value taxation. It went around the country like wildfire. Everybody got excited about it, but nobody changed their legislation. There's only 2 states in the country that allow that taxation system, Pennsylvania and Vermont. That's another thing you can ask your state legislature to do. Incidentally, when I talk to people about taxes, everybody's like, oh, it's so hard, it's so complicated, this. I see the same problem that he experienced. Everything that I do and show you is going to feel kind of hard, difficult. So this woman here, Elizabeth Maggie Phillips, who has spectacular eyebrows, she was a Georgist, and she thought, I'm not even going to work with the adults. I'm going to work with kids. I'm going to create a board game to teach people Henry George taxation, and here it is. Did y'all recognize it? Monopoly. How do you win Monopoly? Location, land assembly, put buildings on it. That's it. So this is the way to think about land value taxation synthetically in my mind. That's the simplest way to get to this. But yeah, right now the current system is the lower the density, the lower the value, the lower the taxes.
One other question, and we're going to hit a break. Any other questions?
Incidentally, I'd recommend this guy's book. I don't know if y'all know Chuck Marone from Strong Towns. Chuck's on fire about the cost of roads, and he just captured a lot of it in this book. And he's going to be publishing a bunch more of these. He has a blog where he writes about this stuff. A lot of the analysis that we do, it basically visualizes the stuff he talks about. But if you want to be entertained or maybe even depressed, read his book. He's from Minnesota, so he is polite and nice about it.
All right, we're going to take a break. 10 minutes. We've got some very nice, wonderful things to eat and drink in the back and some other things to drink over here. Take a few minutes. I'm going to corral you back in about 10 minutes.